In AQA English Language Paper 1 Question 4, you'll be given a statement based on a specific part of the text and asked to what extent you agree or disagree with the statement. Let's look at a typical question based on the extract you can download for free through following the link in the description. Focus this part of your answer on the second half of the source from line 16 to the end. This extract shows how frightened the narrator feels, which could explain why he abandoned the pony and trap to save himself. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? In your response, you could write about your own impressions of the narrator, comment on how the writer has created these impressions, support your opinions with quotations from the text, 20 marks. So the first thing to say here is that you can agree, disagree, or have a balanced view where you perhaps agree with one element of the statement, that the narrator is frightened, but disagree with the second part, that that's why he abandoned the pony and trap to save himself. All three are valid options. Now, as a 20-mark question, you should spend around 25 minutes on question 4. That means you've got enough time to think about the two different parts of the statement, reread the section of the text in question, and make your mind up whether you will agree, disagree, or have a balanced view. The assessment objective is AO4, to evaluate texts critically and support this with appropriate textual references. A continual sticking point for many students has been with the analysis of methods. It came up in the very first exam report and was still mentioned as an issue in the November 2023 exam. So let's look at that in more detail, focusing on that second bullet point to comment on how the writer has created these impressions. There's been some confusion with this question at times. Given that it's not assessing AO2, the use of language and structure, the question has been, well, which methods can I actually write about? The good news is I've looked through the past mark schemes and you can write about any method if it's relevant to the question. That includes language, structure, tone, linguistic choices, irony, themes, message, moral, symbolism, imagery, sentence length, verb tense, narrative, voice, on it goes. There's a huge list. In other words, you can write about any method the writer has used if you feel that method has created the impression you're writing about. And that's a really important point. One of the wording changes to this question for 2026 onwards is all about the fact that you're not just analysing the methods on their own in isolation with no reference at all to the statement you're supposed to be responding to. No, comments on methods must be used to support your response to the statement. So in our example, we're analysing how the narrator is frightened and how he abandoned the trap to save himself, and anything we write about methods must be linked to us agreeing or disagreeing with those statements. We're not just analysing methods on their own in isolation. So how do we approach this question? Well, there are two approaches. I'll explain both and you choose the one you like. As I've already said, break apart the two parts of the statement, reread the lines in the question and think about whether you will agree, disagree, or have a balanced view. Now, approach 1 is to underline or circle or star anything that seems to be important in helping you make a decision about whether the narrator seems frightened, which could explain why he abandoned the pony and trap to save himself, and to see if in those things you've underlined you can identify a method in the bits you've found. Now, the risk with this is that you can end up just retelling the plot, writing things like the narrator is frightened because he can't tell where the sound is coming from. This isn't wrong, but it's not analysing any method. Approach number 2 is to look at the methods being used and see if you can link them to the statements in the question. Why don't you pause the video now and have a go at that? You can download the extract free through following the link in the description. If you're looking for methods, you need to make sure you can explain how they're linked to the question though. For example, the mist played tricks. That's personification, and I think we could link that to the narrator being frightened because they've given the mist a sense of agency, as if it's actively trying to deceive, as if it has sinister motives. The rhetorical question, what use would that be, is something we can link to being frightened too, but a bit later on we see an example of sibilance with all was still and silent. Now that's definitely a method, but the question is, how does that method show the narrator's frightened or link to him abandoning the pony and trap to save himself? And the answer is, I don't think it does. So there we found a method, but it's not one we can really link to the statement. And that often seems to be the case with alliteration and sibilance in my experience. So if we cannot link that method to the statement we're responding to, we're not going to write about it. Now perhaps you disagree, and you're welcome to add a comment in the comments section if you actually think you can link that sibilance to the demands of the question. So it might take around 5 minutes to get this far, and then it's time to write our answer. Let's have a look at a full answer. It is clear the narrator is frightened in this part of the text, so I agree with that point, but I disagree that he abandoned the pony and trap to save himself. The writer creates a sense of fear in this part of the text with a feeling of danger. This part of the extract opens with the realization that the mist played tricks on the narrator. The personification of the mist brings about the sense that the mist is a real, live being with threatening intentions, determined to ensure the narrator cannot find a clear path to safety. The fear that the narrator feels is made palpable through the writer's choice of the verbs chilled and horrified. The verb chilled illustrates that not only is the cold and misty weather frightening, but he's also chilled to the core with his fear. This fear is so real that the narrator describes how he was almost weeping in an agony of fear. The writer's use of the noun agony indicates that the fear felt was so intense, so real, that it brought about a deep and prolonged pain. The reader is also given a sense of the narrator's fear through the writer's use of sounds. The marsh emits a curious, draining, sucking, churning sound, and it then hears a cry, a shout, a terrified, sobbing cry, and then the appalling last noises of a pony and trap. The noises of the marsh sound threatening. The writer's use of the onomatopoeic sucking helps us to appreciate these strange sounds coming from the marsh, and although the narrator cannot see what is happening, there is little ambiguity here. We understand that the sucking noise is the quicksand of the marsh bringing the pony and trap to make its last noises. The horror felt by the narrator at this point is shared by the reader, as we're both left to understand beyond any doubt that a child and adult are being sucked into the marsh. For these reasons, I do agree the extract shows how frightened the narrator is in this part of the source. I disagree, however, that the narrator abandoned the pony and trap to save himself. The narrator is in a clear state of distress at this point in the story, and he was forced to make a decision under difficult circumstances. We know that the mist clouded him and everything from his sight, so it's unlikely he would have been able to help the pony and trap, as he would not have been able to see clearly enough to help. The narrator explains that the only thing was to get back to Eel Marsh House to try and signal for help from there, and the writer's use of the phrase only thing emphasises that there were no other viable alternatives in this course of action. Even when the narrator manages to fumble his way blindly to the door of the house, he's still shuddering at the dreadful thoughts. The narrator begins to run forward, then asks what use would that be. The writer's use of a rhetorical question here shows they did not abandon the pony and trap to save themselves. He simply understands he has no chance of saving them. Through using a rhetorical question, the suggestion is that the answer is already implied. The narrator realizes there is nothing he can do to resolve the situation. The structural decision to focus here on the narrator's thoughts about how he could save those in danger shows that he is not considering how he can himself escape the danger, but is instead trying to work out how to help. The question being rhetorical, however, shows that there is nothing he can do, and so I disagree with the second part of the statement. The narrator was being selfless and brave rather than selfish and cowardly. If you found this video useful and got this far, please do hit the like button and subscribe. You can also pick up my language guide. The ebook is free at the moment. If you pick it up in this bundle, you get my language, literature and poetry guide for £9.98. They're ebooks sent to your email. You can read them on your phone, your iPad, your computer. If you want the paperback editions, they're available on Amazon and they're linked in the description. Thank you for watching.